Hey folks, it's Aimee popping in quick with a bit of context before this next episode rolls. So for this month, we've been talking about why recreation matters and how closely play and mental health are linked. This episode gets a lot more practical. Henry and I talk about what actually gets in the way of fun, things like anhedonia, quite literally, but also overthinking. Or this idea that there's supposed to be one clean, logical fix to how we feel. So we also borrow a really useful metaphor from philosopher Karl Popper that I love. It's this clocks and clouds metaphor. So listen for that. And then toward the end, we'll get into something that trips us up so often, really about letting go of the outcome. Whether that's who wins the game or whether we're doing it right. So if you've been feeling like a little fun rusty, this episode is for you. Enjoy. So the theme of this episode is fun or play. In episode 5, we also talked about this element and got into a related concept of flow. So head over there after this one for some more goodies. I think it adds more evidence as well for why fun is seriously important for mental health. And in that episode, in episode 5, Henry, you also talked about play or fun as both a manifestation of joy and a creator of joy. And you said when we don't feel joyful, doing fun things might just get us there. So first, I 100% agree. And as we talk about here, practicing these elements like fun can get that upward spiral moving, where more health promoting behaviors become easier. They just kind of build on each other. And we'll talk about some specific ways to get that spiral going in this episode. But first, I want to dive into the obstacles. So I think doing fun things to feel better is really hard when you're not feeling particularly fun, when you feel depressed. So anhedonia, that inability to feel pleasure and sort of pulling away from activities that have given us pleasure in the past are like red flag signs of depression. So doing fun things when you feel depressed or just in a crappy mood seems like, a lot of energy to kind of fight against. So I'm curious what you think about that, Henry. Before we get into the strategies, how might we be able to sort of reduce some of this energy, that kind of inertia?
Well, first, let me say that one of the goals of Joy Lab is to have more inner freedom. So we don't want you to get the message that you should try to have fun, even if you don't feel like it. It's okay to step back, listen to yourself, be guided by what really feels right to you and not what anyone else thinks you ought to do. That being said, the inability to enjoy things, to get pleasure from what normally gives you pleasure is one of the clearest signs of depression. And what I usually hear from my patients is that once their more acute or distressing symptoms have subsided, one of their biggest long-term concerns is that they just don't get much joy or pleasure from life. There's a kind of flatness. And even if they still want to do things, even if they know that they'd feel better if they did, it's just really, really hard to get themselves to do these things.
Yeah.
So I think that right there is a really good role for treatments of depression, whether that be a medication or a natural therapy or something behavioral, but adding something to just help you get over the hump, to get just enough energy or motivation to get yourself moving and in a healthier direction.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to get into specifics of treatment here, of course, because we don't have time. What I'll say right now is that there is no shame in needing to take something to give you a boost. And whether that be a prescription medication or a natural therapy, it's just another tool. And if you can feel just a little bit better, you might actually be able to do the things you would normally do that you would normally enjoy. And then, even if you don't enjoy it right now because of how you feel, there's a really good chance that you will soon, that it will move you in that direction. So there is a concept in therapy that if you act as if you feel better than you actually do, that it might, in fact, make you feel better. So some people call this fake it till you make it. And sometimes it is kind of dismissed, thought of as being disingenuous or that you're just in denial. But I do think that there's something to it. And it is not denial if you know that you don't feel like doing something, but you do it anyway.
Right.
That's just kind of good practice, good common sense. Now, you don't want to let your emotions have the last word about what you do or don't do. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, if you just start by changing what you do, your mood, in fact, will follow that.
I like that distinction, sort of acknowledging that you don't want to do it. But maybe you're going to try it anyway because it might nourish you. There's something I think really empowering about that. It's like, okay, I hear you, depression, you're loud and clear, but I'm going to do something else. You kind of chip away at a mood or a stagnant path with just little actions that might be different. I find that empowering. I think a related obstacle has to do with how we sort of reject the intuitive, kind of small and diverse steps that we can also take to help us feel better. We can get tricked into this idea that there's sort of one logical solution that can solve it all. It's the only thing that'll make me feel better, and I'll have to wait until it's given to me before I take action. And as you were saying, Henry, there's certainly that beginning phase where you might need a little bit more support to get over the hump. But then this is different. That's sort of, just this waiting game where we're waiting for all of the pieces to come into line and solve it for us. And it's not a surprising way of thinking, sort of given things like single cause bias, right? We humans want and generally falsely believe that there's one cause and one effect. There's only one solution to my depression. And to kind of illustrate that, I like philosopher of science Karl Popper's distinction between clocks and clouds. I think it actually illustrates why mental health treatment outcomes aren't so great with the usual care model. But so Karl Popper suggested that we can kind of divide the world into two categories, clocks and clouds. And he noted that clocks are these really tight ordered systems that can be explained and solved by reduction. The clock is broken. Follow these simple steps to investigate, and the solution comes down to this one universal simple fix or few fixes. Whereas clouds are, as he stated, highly irregular, disorderly, and more or less unpredictable. I think we can all kind of see where we're going with this, right? So Popper said that our mistake in science, but I think all of us do this, our mistake is to pretend that everything is a clock, that everything can be solved in this really ordered, boiled down, logical way. And Popper believed that pretending everything is a clock is just doomed to failure because we live in a universe of clouds, not clocks. And I feel like mental health is such a cloud. But, we've been really trying to treat it like a clock for so long.
I don't think I've ever heard this about the clocks and clouds before, and I just love it. It makes so much sense. I think it's just so clear.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think we easily fall into that trap of thinking that there is this one thing that's gone wrong, and if we can figure it out, we can fix it. It's weird because when you study the human body, the human brain especially, you realize really quickly just how complex it is and how one thing influences another, which influences another, and it just kind of so complicated. And yet, we are trained to find what's wrong and fix it.
Yeah.
And maybe the complexity of all this is just so overwhelming that we look for simple solutions. I think there might be some value in that, but I do think that, for example, the way that we are kind of approaching something like depression with medication, just how widely the antidepressants are prescribed today, this idea that if depression were one problem, there would be one solution. And it just doesn't really work out that way in the real world. Mm. So if you were to take a look at the table of contents of one of my books, you would know immediately that I'm a clouds person. I have to laugh when somebody tells me, I really liked your book, but it was just so overwhelming. And I laugh because they're right. I tried so hard to capture and honor the complexity of this human condition. I might have gone just a little too far trying to be so comprehensive. So I feel like I've spent a lot of time since then trying to simplify or maybe helping folks understand their patterns so that they can narrow down their choices of solutions. You don't have to have the whole universe of solutions if you have a clearer sense of what your own underlying patterns are. So honestly, I think the way out of anxiety and depression is going to be a little bit different for every individual person. So just like fun, can look different for everyone. There are people whose idea of fun is actually fixing broken clocks, for example.
Right.
And then there's others like me who enjoy more kind of floating in the clouds, and it's all good.
Yeah, it's so true. I like the simple quote from C.S. Lewis. He says, have fun, even if it's not the same kind of fun everyone else is having. It's going to look different. And as you noted, Henry, it can feel overwhelming to know that there's not one solution. Obviously, that's where single cause bias comes in. We're trying to, at our last episode, we're trying to calm some uncertainty, make sense of it. But there's not an easy solution to any problem. Whether, if we're thinking it's a simple problem or a complex problem, there's usually multiple solutions. But, that's actually what I found so powerful about your books, because what I was doing, what I was being told should make me feel better wasn't, so amidst that overwhelm of opening it up to more than one solution, it does put the power back in our hands, and that ownership, that agency allows us to take some steps. We aren't broken clocks that can't be fixed. We're clouds. And in line with that, another obstacle shows up that I want to get into, and it's something called metacognition. So metacognition usually gets discussed as a good thing. It's basically defined as thinking about thinking. So meta. We talk about its benefits a lot in mindfulness and awareness research. We leverage it at JoyLab. But, too much of a good thing is just too much. And too much thinking is too much thinking, and it will block fun. I think this is super relatable as an obstacle for a lot of us. Our thoughts just get in the way. And so I really like the way you talk about this, Henry. Can you describe more about how metacognition can show up as an obstacle?
Wow. There's nothing that says fun quite like the word metacognition, right?
Over here, we have fun. Super nerdy. Love it.
So I think I first came across this term myself at a Buddhism and neuroscience conference. And you're right. I think it's a term that's usually associated with awareness and awareness research. Yeah. Basically, as I understand it, it means developing the ability to observe yourself as a thinker. And I do see that as one of the main benefits of engaging in a mindfulness practice. Mm-hmm. And here's why I think that can be so helpful. So imagine that I get totally carried away by my thoughts, so much so that they are making me miserable. This has happened to me, Aimee. Actually, it has really happened to me not even
us,
that
Henry.
long ago. But
we hear you. We hear you clucking.
Yeah. Let's say I don't know that I'm miserable because of my thoughts. I simply believe my thoughts to be true. So then, if I can become aware that I am just thinking and that this is not actually all true, it can be a huge relief. That can give me some inner freedom. And I think that's the value of metacognition, of becoming able to see yourself as the creator of your own thoughts.
Right.
But if I'm playing a game, let's say I'm playing spike ball with my family, which we do quite a bit, I do not want to be thinking about thinking. I don't want to be thinking about anything at all at that moment. And sometimes I do start thinking, and as you know, it's a disaster when you do that and you're playing a game like that. So I just want to be totally into the game, reacting in the moment as best I can, as best my body allows me to. When I'm playing with my family, I know I'm still going to lose, but that's not the point.
Right.
So you hear this from athletes often. I got into my head. And when you're playing a game or doing anything that really gives you pleasure, you just want to be there for it. You want to live the experience rather than think about living the experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you can see how metacognition, both or that you're just getting caught up in your thoughts, can both block you from even starting to engage, and then also when you should be there and instead you're somewhere else. And this really tracks for me. I absolutely loved basketball growing up. You've maybe heard Henry and I talk a little bit about it here. And my dad and I would play one-on-one all the time. I played in high school. I even had some scholarships to play in college. But when my dad died, my senior year of high school, I just could not play anymore. You know, instead of playing the game, having fun like I would do, all I could think about on the court was that this was a thing we used to do together. And just, I would get caught up in my head about, then he's not here. So I would lose my ability to just be in the game. And I think now, if I could have seen fun and play as a tool to heal, which I really think it can be, like we do in Joy Lab, maybe I could have used basketball to embrace that connection with my dad, which I love. Like we can use things like games, like basketball, like fun to cultivate joy, to promote positive mental health. And this also makes me think, of course, about a Ted Lasso episode when Danny gets the yips. Such a clear example. How people who are paid crazy amounts of money to play a game start to overthink it, and then they just can't play.
Yeah, that is such a great example because Danny is not only a really good player, he is the embodiment of joy.
Right.
And then even he got the yips.
Yeah.
So for those of you who haven't seen Ted Lasso, Danny Rojas was just a ringer who joined the club mid-season, and he absolutely loved the game of soccer. His catchphrase was, "Soccer is life." And when he plays, he just has the biggest smile and a bounce in his step, and you just see so clearly how he is having fun.
Yeah.
It's not just a job. Then one day during practice, he got injured, and then he heard about this curse. He heard it from the fans, I think, that this team is cursed by somebody who put the curse on them years ago. And so Danny began to believe in this, and then he believed that because of this curse, he was never going to play again. And then that belief started to spread to the rest of the team, which I think is a really good example of how negative thinking can go viral in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
And then the entire team started to play poorly. So finally, Ted Lasso in his, bumbling but wise way held a ceremony where they each brought something that they personally really valued, and then they put it into a big garbage can and burned it. And, it's such a vivid example of one way how we can release negative beliefs and step out of our thinking just so we can get back to playing again.
Yeah. Let's channel some of that Ted Lasso energy. Let's get into those cleansing rituals or some fun strategies. Anyway, so I think what we'll do is break them up to sort of address the obstacles that we've noted. And we'll kind of start with how to prepare for fun. Sounds kind of boring, but it's effective to make it more likely. Then we'll present some fun ideas. And then I think we can finish with how we can let go of outcomes. So Henry, do you want to explain that first one, kind of setting the stage for fun?
Yeah, sure. So remember, this is meant to be fun. So we don't want to make it feel like work or just add even more to your plate of things to do. So we'll try to keep our focus on some ways to remove obstacles or add some really simple things that don't really take any extra time or effort on your part. So first, let's think about some easy ways to get ready for fun. Now, for a lot of people, and I put myself in this camp, anticipation is really a good portion of what makes something so enjoyable. So feel free to think about it ahead of time. Imagine yourself with the people you're going to see or doing the thing that you're going to enjoy. Let yourself get excited about it. And then here's a super simple way to try to unclutter your mind before a fun event. Take a little break from your phone or your computer. It is really just a simple way to allow your mind to clear. Just set the phone aside for an hour or two, maybe even turn it off so you don't get tempted by it. Just simply don't feed your mind with images, news, or something on your to-do list, just for a little while. Then maybe you actually have a chance to be more present when the event itself comes around.
Yeah.
Now, here's an example that I got from my dog, Bodhi. Bodhi is over a year old now, so he's calming down, but he is still a puppy and he is still full of fun. And here's one way that Bodhi prepares himself for fun. So if I let him off leash somewhere where I can do that, he will be waiting for me at the rise in the road, or maybe at the top of the stairs here at home. And he's waiting, and then he just crouches down. It's as if he thinks I can't see him or something. And he's looking very intently at me. Now, I know that he is about to, pounce on me, attack me. And if he weren't so cute and nearly harmless, I might even be a little bit, intimidated. But it's just his way of saying, hey, get ready. We are about to have the most fun you can have if you're a domesticated, house-trained pack animal, right? So, find your ready position, get ready to pounce or move on the court or whatever it is that you do for fun.
Yeah, there's something about power posing for fun, right? Fun posing. I love that stance. My pups do it too, and you just feel that energy. It's super contagious. I want to go in the mix with it, So it is powerful. You present your body in that way, whatever way that feels empowering for you. So okay, we've set the stage. Now, what can we do to have fun? And I want to say, even if you're feeling fun rusty, you've had fun before. You're good at it. You're wired for it. It's part of you. So to really kind of be in line with that, one strategy that I really love to rely on is to pick a playful, fun activity you did as a kid and do it today and tomorrow, even for just 2 or 3 minutes to start. Seriously, build a fort. draw on the sidewalk with chalk, build a fairy garden, play basketball, whatever it is. I think the point here is to not overthink it. The activity is part of you. So let's uncover it. I love this Carl Jung quote. I think it speaks perfectly to this strategy. He says that the small child is still around and possesses a creative life, which I lack. But how can I make my way to it? And later on, Jung in his notes identifies that engaging in the play he enjoyed as a child is actually the route to spark that playful kid within.
Love that. Well, I told you earlier that I'm a cloud person. And I remember as a kid laying on my back, just looking up at the clouds. And, if I was with a friend, we might comment on their shapes or whatever. But I enjoyed just being alone and watching the clouds kind of go by. It almost put me into a really pleasant trance type of state. And, not just looking at clouds, I just remember spending a lot of time on the ground as a kid, wrestling, playing in the dirt, building a snow fort, whatever it was, rolling around.
Yeah.
And I think there's something here for us still as adults, that idea of literally getting down on the ground, touching the earth, letting ourselves be animated by it, grounded by it, or maybe just watching the clouds and letting ourselves become entranced.
Yeah, you're transporting me to a snow fort. I don't know if anybody, is in southern states or elsewhere. They're like, what's a snow fort, perhaps? But man, how safe you felt. And there's something magical about being in that little fort. You create that little world. And it makes me think as well about sort of balancing all those clouds in the universe that we are as well, that complexity of life with grounding and play. Like there is such simplicity in that we crave. These things require us to be totally present, head out of the clouds and really get into one of the most basic, simple animal drives, this instinctual desire to play. And, there's all this great research too coming out for those grounding practices. It helps us to sort of shake off fear, to release tension, to feel more connected. And on that idea of grounding, another strategy I think that's important and that's easy to rely on is just movement, and really anything that feels fun and true for you when you feel in your body. And I think it can be easy to fall into sort of fad workouts and dismiss the stuff that feels really good in our own body uniquely, and also to remember that it doesn't matter if you're good at it. I think of dancing as a good example here. It's so easy to think I'm not a good dancer. So, you never go to that dance looking group exercise class, or you never just jam out at home. But dancing is really in our DNA. We humans have been dancing for ceremonies and rituals for millennia. So channeling some of that movement that is embedded in you. And it's absolutely worth our time. Dancing and really any playful activity, any movement where you really get engrossed in, it actually helps you to take some fuller, more supportive breaths. And also engaging in playful movement is really good for digestion and GI health. I think that's powerful. You reduce overall muscle tension, right? So all of these are immensely powerful. It also reduces fatigue and can help you to feel less stiff. Totally worth your time.
Yeah. I always find it interesting that you can be less tired by expending more energy.
Right?
It's totally paradoxical, but it's true. It is so true.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And when you just do it for a moment, you don't have to go out for 30 or 45 minutes to do it for a minute and then sit back and see do I feel a little better?
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I'll just say one more thing about play, and it sounds on the surface to be pretty obvious, but I don't think it is actually. And that is to let go of the outcome. We actually talked quite a bit about this in our last session where we talked about embracing uncertainty and really being okay with not knowing. And this is especially hard for those of us who are overachievers or just really, really competitive.
Right.
So I remember when my son was right about 13 years old, and he was, and this is putting it mildly, he was quite competitive. He played on a traveling soccer team, and, they probably got into a league that was just a level higher than where they should have been. So they had really good players, but they just hardly ever won at that level. So my son just didn't appear to be having any fun at all. So one day I felt I just had to talk to him about it and said something about how good it will be for him later on in life to learn how to lose well when you're young. I think I try to talk about, being able to enjoy the process and not just the outcome of the game. That winning is good, losing is also good, and it's a really great life skill to know how to do both of them well.
Yeah.
And I remember his response was something like, "Dad, we lose all the time. I think I'm pretty good at it," something like that. So just recently, we talked about this conversation again. I don't even remember why it came up, but I was surprised that he remembered it. In fact, it sounded to me like he had embellished it quite a bit over the years. And he said he'd shared that lesson with his friends from time to time. Now, my son is still plenty competitive, but I love that he took that idea to heart. And now he is somebody who just loves to play and have fun. If only I could beat him in spike ball once in a while, because, it's good to know how to lose, but every time, I mean, come on.
We need balance in life. Yeah. 1,000 joys, 1,000 sorrows,
Exactly.
as we've talked about. I love that lesson. I don't think I was taught it very well, but when you're not afraid to lose, the world kind of opens up. I think it's a massive lesson that we should be talking about more with our kids. You can play more, trust more, even love more when you're not afraid to lose. It's a good lesson to start the world off with, or learn it now. I think as well, before we end, I want to come sort of full circle a bit and kind of counter another piece of messaging that's common in mental health, and cue up some of the strategies that we just talked about with the story. So there's this idea, I think, that the path to feeling better has to be just as depressing as the way you've been feeling. The remedy for depression has to always be bitter, because that's what depression is. You have to pick up all the terrible breadcrumbs, make your way back before you can find your way to joy. And as we've been talking about today, that's just not true. So I've been feeling this a lot lately. How can we uncover more of our fun nature as a tool for healing? So I'm going to wrap us up here, I think, with a little last story of how fun has been one of my key mental health tools of late. So in the last few weeks, my sister and I have been trying to navigate this new phase of caring for our mom. So our mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's a few years ago now, and she's moving into that phase of just not being able to live alone. Really, she needs more support. And it's so hard. Parenting a parent is like a total mind trip. I'm sure a lot of folks listening have been there. It doesn't feel fun. And then parenting our 4-year-old, it's just like too much parenting for me. And so this weekend, I got out this life-sized cardboard clubhouse that I had gotten for our daughter for her birthday, fully intending that it was like a brilliant way to keep her busy so that I could get some work done and just like check out a bit from the week. The week had just felt so overwhelming with all the financial and planning details for my mom, and just sort of witnessing how she's kind of losing bits of herself and her abilities. So anyway, my daughter and I went outside to have breakfast yesterday, and she saw the clubhouse outside and shrieked with excitement because she wanted to eat breakfast in there. So she grabbed her food. Obviously, she grabbed a magic wand, a tub of chalk, a book. And when she asked me to join her, I just kind of looked and she begged me to join her. And I was like, okay, I really did not want to, but I said yes anyway. I think because we're working with this element of fun, just another power of Joy Lab, it just sort of anchors your attention to an element. So I was channeling fun here. So I packed myself into that life-size clubhouse, like life-size for a 4-year-old. So stuffed myself in and we started to eat. And she asked if I could read her a book while we ate. And she had picked out Maurice Sendak's book, Where the Wild Things Are. And we started reading. And we drew a funny monster with the chalk in the clubhouse. We pretended that we were, in the jungle of the wild things. And like all of a sudden it was 35 minutes later and we were cracking up, pretending, and just being silly. And I realized I hadn't thought a bit about all the stuff that had been so heavy on me during the week. It was just a break, but it wasn't the tune-out break of like, a Netflix binge or something like that. And it wasn't a formal meditation break or a session with a therapist or all the other great things that can help you work through a tough time. It was a fun break. And honestly, I played again that day. I played 4 corners in a bouncy house, truly. And it was transformative. Like this upward spiral was taking shape, right? I started in the clubhouse. It kind of inched me into that bouncy house later on in the day. And this might seem silly, which I think is the point. But just those few hours of total play have actually helped me to move a bit more smoothly, I think, into this new role that my sister and I are in with my mom. I feel like some of the anger and frustrations that I was sort of carrying into that new role have kind of softened. And I want to keep it that way with more play, to keep sort of softening those anger and frustrations. Not that I'm ignoring them, but that I'm inviting play into this space as well. And it reminded me of this short documentary I saw on Maurice Sendak. I don't remember what it was called, but he said in it, "It is through fantasy that children achieve catharsis. It's the best means they have for taming wild things." I think that's it, right? Those wild things, those obstacles that keep us from tapping into our joy, from having fun, from being there for fun. And it's not just kids, right? Adults, we need this catharsis too. So on that note, let's take fun more seriously as a tool for healing and as a piece of ourselves that needs to stay alive. I think we can use fun and play truly as a powerful tool to really tame our wild things and to uncover more joy.
Thank you for listening to the Joy Lab podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, visit joylab.coach to subscribe for your monthly infusion of joy and to learn more about the full Joy Lab program. Be sure to rate and review us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.
Please remember that this content is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not intended to provide medical advice and is not a replacement for advice and treatment from a medical professional. Please consult your doctor or other qualified health professional before beginning any diet change, supplement, or lifestyle program. Please see our terms for more information.